So you guys probably don't know this, but I find boxing very interesting since the whole YouTuber boxing shit, right? And I found this dude who like goes over their styles and shit. Roundhouse Radio. You guys should check him out. He's actually pretty entertaining. And yeah, let's see. He's gonna be breaking down if Dylan Dennis is good and can he win versus KSI. I don't think he can, but we'll see.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Roundhouse Radio. So obviously, we've got Dillon Danis, more commonly known as Dillon Lannis, the meme page operator turned professional boxer, coming up here fighting KSI very, very soon. Now, what's great is we have a decent amount of boxing sparring footage that we have from Dillon Danis that I think paints a pretty good picture as to his boxing ability now, how he's developed as a fighter. And there's a few things that I'm going to go over that a lot of other people aren't noticing and haven't seen in the space, you know, revolving around his injury, the development of his fighting, and everything in between. Guys, let's dive right into it. Now, the first and most important sparring footage and most recent sparring footage that we have is against the fighter Paul Bamba. So immediately you see some decent stuff from Dillon here, right? So you see he squares up, he's a southpaw, obviously, throws a feint or lead uppercut, which is a dangerous move even for southpaws to throw, specifically when sparring another southpaw like Paul Bamba is, because you're exposing yourself to that power hand, but he gets away with it. And from that sort of shovel, uppercut, hook, he pivots. Now, something to notice here is when he's pivoting, both his feet are off the ground, right? So when both your feet are off the ground, obviously you're not really going to be able to generate nearly as much power. You're sort of in a space of nothingness right now. You're not planted to the ground. You don't have any grounding. So when you see professional boxers, high-level boxers, they will step and then pivot off that step, having them have a space on the ground where they're strong and in a powerful position at all times. Dillon's not really doing this here. He's sort of leaping into the pivot. However, it's still a good move. It's still a motion that works well. He's doing it about 50% well, right? So he pivots, then he does land, and when he's landed, he transfers his power and he lands a pretty decent power hand, you know? So that's a pretty good motion there. He lands that uppercut, pivots, and then gets the angle and cracks Paul Bamba across the face. It's important to notice also that Paul Bamba is a very low-level boxer, not a high-level boxer, but a boxer nonetheless. So this is still not an MMA fighter he's sparring against. This is a boxer at the end of the day he's sparring against. Another thing we see here is we see when he gets punched, he's guarding somewhat properly, but he's not really moving in a way that you want to see when someone's defending, right? When you're guarding, you're not just trying to put your hands up and squaring up against your opponent. You want to be kind of dynamic in the way you guard. If you have to use that traditional guard, you want to be kind of moving backwards properly with it.
I'm pretty sure he's also a boxer.
He's just very much in front of his face, getting punched, but he defends it properly. And then we see something here. We see a double feint up high, which is good motion, right? It brings the guard up for Paul Bamba. And then he throws that uppercut to the body, which is a pretty decent shot. Let's see it in full here. Uppercut to the body. And then he's kind of all over him, landing shots to the body. But this is stuff that we see from Dillon that isn't so great. And this is that sort of MMA implementation that he's not going to be able to shake. So what
are your thoughts for the future?
In a world without rules.
In a world without rules.
We see here that you would not want to see from a boxer. Immediately, you see he's squared up, right? So both of his feet facing forward, wide stance, squared up against his opponent, and leaning on his opponent here. Now, in MMA, this works because you want to be in this position. And in boxing, I guess you could say it works in the sense that you might be able to wear your opponent out. But what it does do that isn't very good is it forces you to be relying on your opponent's position to be holding you up, and it makes you more susceptible to punches because you're leaning forward into punches. So something that's of note here on the heavy bag is we see these uppercuts here. This, in my opinion at least, I would consider pretty low level uppercuts. Why do I say that? Well, as you can see, the uppercut is really not being generated anywhere other than a little bit from the hips, but mostly the arm. This is 90% arm punches, right? So yeah, he's pivoting his body to some extent, but really these are just arm punches. He's not really generating much power in those uppercuts. And here is where we see that sort of lean really start to bite Dillon. And I think this is something that he would really, really have to develop and get better at, because in boxing specifically, you are not constantly trying to close that gap. You're not constantly trying to embrace and clinch with your opponent. But Dillon, as a grappler turned MMA fighter, that's like his bread and butter. That's like his entire training base has been revolved around punching to close that distance and get close. So as you see in these clips, when he's throwing these combinations, he's almost falling forward, right? So he throws this combination, and do you see how he stumbles forward? Stumbles forward into his opponent, literally falling forward.
That's not good.
That's the best example of it right there, where he falls into Paul. Now, why is that so negative? Well, just imagine a situation like this where you throw your combination, throw your 2 punches, square up your feet to your opponent. So he throws one, and then he throws the other, and then he's squared up. His knees are forward, his shoulders are forward, and he's falling into his opponent. Imagine his punches don't land. Imagine these punches get slipped, right? So slip, and then this is,
and then KSI's overhand
is what your opponent's looking at. This position
his right overhand
right here.
Because this is his right hand, right? So that would be easy for KSI to do his right overhand, right?
Hands
from the video
down
we
to
watched
his side,
yesterday.
Feet forward, shoulders forward, leaning forward, falling towards his opponent. So imagine that combined with slipping off to the right and planting and powering a right hand right down the middle here, or even a left hook, or even a jab at this point when you're falling into your opponent. No guard at all. If they're able to throw that counter from this position right here, what happens there is
not good.
What happens there is you quickly get teleported into the big sky, and your consciousness ends up in a cloud, and you're just kind of hanging out there, and nothing's going on, and then you wake up in an ambulance, and that's what would happen here if you combine a guy like Dillon Danis going in to fight KSI, who, you know, as we see in his heavy bag work,
loves
he can
overhands.
throw power. And when KSI is able to really generate, sit down, and plant on that power and land, if you're falling into that, there is really no way that you're going to be a conscious individual after that. And obviously, Dillon hasn't been knocked out yet. You know, maybe he has in sparring, but from what we know, he hasn't been knocked out as a professional. So he's not going to have developed that fear of getting knocked out. He's not going to have developed that understanding of where he can push his body to. And these clips, it does not look good at all. Now, some good things we do notice is he definitely knows how to fight within the clinch, right? So he knows how to get dirty, coming in with that lead left hook, right hand, and then he's right all over you. You know, right here, he's obviously utilizing frames well. And this is an example of Paul Bamba not being a very good boxer, because Paul just does not know how to get out of these situations. He doesn't know how to put himself into a position where he's not going to be manipulated like this. You know, you'd never see a high-level pro boxer in a position like this, but whatever, KSI is not a super high-level pro boxer. So it might work, and he's, you know, throwing nice combinations. So we see a 1-2 there. But even there, like, you can see where his body's at, right? Completely squared up with Paul. Not necessarily a good position to be in. And those are good, though. Those snappy punches in combination look pretty good. So there's some things that he does okay, nothing he does great, and a few things he does really, really poorly. Now, here's some other sparring footage from back when he had this knee brace, and this is something that I think is really important to note, because something I saw from Dillon Danis, specifically early in his career, specifically in his MMA fights, is he used linear movement back and forth with explosive leg movement as his main form of defense. So when his opponent would fire at him, he would just explode backwards. However, after having his ACL surgery and doing significant amount of training with this knee sleeve on, we saw a lot of this over probably a good year of development, right? You're training for a year with a knee sleeve on, or at least with a damaged knee. It takes a long time to recover from these things. I think that he might have ingrained into his boxing a much different style from when he first was fighting. So I think that he went from having this sort of explosive, dynamic, Conor McGregor-like karate style movement to this more plodding, heavy on his punches, fumbling forward style of boxing, staying planted, using his guard, and kind of falling forward because of this knee injury and because of training with this knee injury. Like, as you can see here, he's not moving backwards. He's not bouncing backwards, because how can he? He has one leg, right? So he's just absorbing shots, using his guard, and then throwing counters. And these shots are decent. These shots are much, much better than anything else we've seen, really, where he's throwing this 3-punch combination, right hook to the body, followed by a 3-punch combination. That stuff's good, and it looks decent. Obviously, this is not high-level stuff, but you can see he's not really developing any power. This is a slapping right hook to the body, very slapping. There's no movement in the hips, no movement in the legs, so that's not going to have too much power. And then the other two come up, and they're nice and decent. But I worry that maybe because of this knee injury, he might have developed some habits that are very negative to his overall striking and boxing ability if he hasn't been utilizing that footwork, utilizing that explosive movement of the legs and the feet. So that's something that I'm very, very interested to see. Overall, obviously, KSI is not ready for a super high-level boxer, and I think that Dillon Danis is a fantastic opponent for him. He knows how to make angles. He knows how to expose angles from his opponent. He knows how to throw straight punches. He knows how to throw punches in combination. He comes to fight. These are all really good things. However, there's a couple big gaps that we see, specifically squaring up to his opponent, desperately trying to close the gap, falling forward if he misses or doesn't land clean. All of those things are going to pose incredibly good opportunities for KSI in the fight. Obviously, Dillon Danis, not a high-level boxer, but decent. I don't know. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments what you think about this fight. If you think KSI is going to win, or if you think Dillon Danis has enough to beat him. Thanks so much, guys.
I think KSI is going to win. But that's just my opinion. I mean, comfortably, but I hope Danis at least gives him somewhere of a challenge every time he tweets. I think he tweets has like up to that. True. I like his breakdowns though. They're very entertaining and they're very insightful. Just how good is King Kenny? See, like he has a bunch of shit that we could check out. If I really wanted to, let me know if you want me to check out some other shit. Yeah, bye. Subscribe to him, subscribe to me, like both how she said bye.